Footy Mythbusters.
That's on again. That's on everywhere. Oh, they're banging in. Have a look at them. Smack, crash. McPhee's in there. He's on. Vandenberg. He's given him 4, 5, 6, 7. He is belted McPhee all over the park.
Has just kneed McPhee.
It is on.
Vandenberg has put the right knee into McPhee when he was on
And
the
he's got
ground.
the Claret McPhee splashing everywhere.
Vandenberg is being reported at the moment, and he will go for 6 to 7 weeks without any doubt whatsoever.
Man. It's on again. Murphy's given Beaumont one in the mush. I think we've just cast the clock back 20 years.
Well, that was the line in the sand game here at the MCG. Today, the same two sides meet, Essendon and Hawthorn. And we were actually calling on that day, as you could hear there, JB and myself. And we had Dermot Burton in the special comments up here. And
great call.
As that game was going on, Damo, he was becoming more and more frustrated at the lack of intent by Hawthorn, the lack of energy, the lack of physical approach to the game. And it annoyed him that much, JB, that at halftime he just couldn't contain him. He didn't tell us.
Exited the box.
He didn't tell us.
Yep.
He just sort of took off very, very promptly. Arrived down in the rooms at halftime.
Still on the board, I think, too, BT. Is that correct?
I think he was.
At the time as well?
I think he was.
Yeah.
Marched over to the other side of the ground, to the southern stand, so he had to walk all the way around. Burst through the doors of the rooms there in disbelief of what was being presented publicly in relation to his Hawthorn Football Club, something that he was obviously very much part of, and demanded that he have time with the players to tell them of the importance of playing the Bombers and making sure that, well, in some cases, I'm actually told that in one case he said to one of the players, I can't remember who
Campbell
it was.
Brown?
Might have been Campbell Brown.
Vandenberg, I reckon.
Yeah, that Mark Johnson, who you nicknamed Mr. Sunbury, Little Mighty Mouse, was not to come off the ground alive, and that he would be dealt with in some way. He was not to come off the ground at all because Dermot had singled him out as being the sniper.
Unless he's on a stretcher, I think were the exact. Mark Johnson doesn't come off this ground unless he's on a stretcher because he just belted the big ruckman.
Is that what he'd done?
Side.
Had he belted someone?
Yeah, the
behind
big
play.
ruckman.
Now, the part I'm interested in is what happened in the rooms. I mean,
Yes.
I am told that he burst through the doors and it didn't even matter who was coaching. He was coaching effectively at half time.
Peter Schwab would have been in.
Peter Schwab, and that he was going to take over because he didn't feel that, that they were doing the job that they should have been to get Hawthorn up. Now, Nick Holland is joining us on the line. The CEO of the E.J. Whitten Foundation joins us and was part of Hawthorn's lineup in those particular days. Welcome to you, Nick.
It's good to be here, BT.
Very good. Now, did you hear that little part of the story? We just want to know. So, you were playing that day. What happened did you see Dermot enter the rooms for the line in the sand game?
Actually, that's the first time I've heard the call, and JB's call was fantastic. So, well done on that. And it captured the moment because, you're spot on. We got down to the rooms, went in there after a frustrating first half, and we were very lacklustre against the Bombers, who we probably hadn't beaten since, definitely in the last 6 years. So they had the wood over us. And, Dermot was down there, and he was walking around like a raging bull and grabbed... Did
he demand to speak to the players, or did that just happen as an automatic consequence?
Well, we actually went straight into the room. Swabby was coaching at the time, and he took us inside. And when you're out on the ground, you don't know everything that's occurred away from your area. But Swabby told us that Robbie Campbell, our ruckman, had been in a tackle by a couple of Essendon players, and Mark Johnson had come along and sort of grabbed his legs and spear tackled him into the ground, and Big Robbie sort of had to come off the ground, and Swabby sort of made it clear to us that should inspire us to do something about it. And we walked out of the rooms. We'd had a frustrating year, and even going back a bit further, that was the year that Gary Lyon had inspired Swabby to sort of put it out there. And at our season launch, Swabby had said that we'll win the premiership this year. And obviously, Essendon were a great side, and we'd been copying that sort of week in, week out because we weren't performing well. And yeah, it all came out in the second half, or when we walked out, and yeah, as you said, Dermot was down the rooms and grabbed about 5 or 6 of us. And
who did he grab? Can you remember who he grabbed and addressed?
Yeah, so I was in that group or nearby. I can remember because I did hear the directive, and also Campbell Brown was definitely there. Richard Vandenberg was there, as you said, and yeah, there was Dermy was a director at the time, and yeah, the instruction was that Mark Johnson shouldn't walk off the ground.
Now, you ended up. Was it true that you ended up strangling him?
Well,
Is this why he's on?
so yeah, Vanders obviously is a hothead. Brownie's a hothead, and we ran out the ground, and sure enough, within a couple of minutes of going out into the ground in the second half, the melee started, and I look to see which Essendon player I can grab, and I'm right next to Mark Johnson, and I know he's sort of quick and pretty fierce, so I quickly used my body weight and got him in a headlock and took him to ground, and Chance Bateman, who was alongside sort of wrestling a couple of Essendon players, yelled out to me, he said, "Put him to sleep, Dutch," and so I gripped a bit harder and also I didn't want Mark Johnson getting up because, as you know, he's pretty tough and quick.
Did you forget to let go of the grip?
I did forget to let go of the grips, and then there was a bit of gurgling, and Chance Bateman said, "I think you better ease up a bit, Dutch," and so I let go of the grip, but my eyes were sort of rolling back in my head as well. We were all sort of fired up. We wanted to come out there. We had a disappointing year. You know, we weren't putting enough in. Swabby was right, sort of saying, you know, we had a lacklustre performance.
What would happen now, do you think, if a former player jumped out of a media commentary box, being the Triple M box, strolled into the rooms and demanded that he see the 3 or 4 guys that can do something about it on the ground? How would that be viewed these days, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely would have made front page news the next day, and it was a big story at the time, especially because it came from a director. And to Derm's credit, he actually came out and said, "Yes, I did say that," and so that sort of.
So Nick, just in the end, so just to shorten this up a little, so. In the end, I can't remember you getting a penalty. Now you've deprived him of oxygen for a couple of minutes, and as you say, he had his last gurgle. You didn't actually get suspended, did you?
I didn't get a suspension, but I was part of the $75,000 in fines that were handed out by the AFL, and as player representative for Hawthorn, it was my job to meet the CEO Ian Robson at the time and say, look, we were just acting under instructions. Do you think the club might pay these fines? But the answer was a firm no. So it was a tough time that year down at Hawthorn, and yeah, it's good to see things have turned around so much.
Well, well done, Nick. You've given us the true story on one of the it wasn't really a myth; it was true. The line in the sand.
I haven't heard that aspect of it.
No, but I've never heard that part of it. You're quite right. So,
well done, Dutchie. Thanks for that,
mate.
Well done, Dutch.
Good on you. Cheers, guys.
Thanks for holding there. Brian,
it's good, BT.
There are how many? You've done it for longer than I have. But you think of how many games of footy you've called. I will never forget the 3 minutes of that blue. It was just electric. Well, the thing just erupted.
Well, I can't remember it at all.
The blokes, because it was when the Great Southern Stand was.
Yeah,
I reckon it was half.
It was over
that side, and everyone just came screaming from everywhere. And look, the other thing I remember about it, I think it's the same game, is Campbell Brown coming from the ground and giving someone on the Essendon bench the greatest pasting of all time.
I reckon that was the 09 game.
That was another
when
was
Lloyd
another
got
game.
sued.
Matty Lloyd.
And you interviewed Campbell Brown post.
I asked him later, though, when we saw him socially, and he said it was Dr. Bruce Reid he was giving it to, who was also his family doctor and a great family friend. That's how he rolled, Campbell Brown, which I reckon just sums that bloke up.
Yep. BT's point about what would you do these days to someone who was on the board and incited a riot, I reckon in 2018, you'd be deregistered. I think the AFL would charge you with 1.6 rule of bringing the game into disrepute, and probably with good reason when you reflect upon what happened and why it happened on that day.
But doesn't it just add to the legend of himself?
Absolutely.
The great Dermot Brereton
Strolls
said,
in.
I'm not copping any more of this. And he's just walked out the back of the box.
And then comes back and calls the second half.
Second half, no problem. It was absolutely brilliant. We need to get to the quiz next, and Willis.
Yes.
Just get your shit together.
Yes.
All right? 1-333-537. You've walked a K and a half and got here a minute before we've gone to air.
Which
And
Essendon
after that,
player?
You've given us bugger all.
Which Essendon player?
Not now, Bill.
Not yet, Bill.
Not now.